Hi, I'm Joy, and I want to ask you something very straightforward. How long are you going to wait to start speaking? Most people believe they need confidence first before taking risks, but it's actually quite the opposite. Confidence only grows when you take action, and while you wait to feel ready, life goes by and your voice remains stuck. It may seem unfair, but there's a counterintuitive truth here. Mistakes aren't enemies, they're allies. The sooner you accept imperfect speech, the sooner you'll unlock and realize that fluency is a consequence of the journey, not the wait. The paradox is simple. Those who take the first risk, even if they stumble, will go further than those who spend years preparing in silence. If you feel like this is the kind of reflection you needed to hear, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. Here, you'll not only learn English naturally, but you'll also gain the courage and clarity to express yourself in any situation. Each video is an opportunity to take another real step on your journey. Have you ever noticed how we often create barriers that hold us back? The idea of only speaking when everything is perfect seems logical, but in practice, it only paralyzes us. You rehearse things 1,000 times in your head, repeating phrases mentally, and still nothing comes out. This constant self-demand becomes a blockage that grows stronger every day. I've been there, and I know how it feels to be wasting time. You feel like you're not ready, so you wait a little longer. But that a little longer never ends. The fear of making mistakes grows, and silence becomes a habit. The worst part is that no one is paying as much attention to your mistakes as you are, but your mind insists otherwise. As we remain silent, opportunities pass us by. That chance to practice, to build confidence, to connect, simply vanishes. And the curious thing is that each day of silence makes the next even heavier, as if our tongue were losing flexibility. The good news is that there is a way to break this mental prison, and it starts with a very small step. There's an almost magical moment that happens when you utter your first word. It doesn't have to be a speech. It doesn't have to be perfect. A simple hello already opens a new path within you. That first sound breaks inertia, dismantles years of waiting, and shows, in practice, that speaking is possible. That's when the brain understands, if it came out once, it can come out again. I remember the first time I allowed myself to risk a word in another language. My heart was racing, my mouth felt dry. But when I spoke, I realized nothing terrible had happened. On the contrary, it was liberating. Every word you utter, even if it's crooked, helps create connections in the brain that facilitate the next. It's science, but it's also lived experience. If you're stuck, try starting small. Say hello to someone, order a coffee, send a short voice message. Don't expect to master 100 phrases. Start with one. Confidence comes from action, not theory. And the sooner you experience this small revolution, the sooner you'll feel the path is open to much more. There's an almost magical moment that happens when you utter your first word. It doesn't have to be a speech. It doesn't have to be perfect. A simple hello already opens a new path within you. That first sound breaks inertia, dismantles years of waiting, and shows, in practice, that speaking is possible. That's when the brain understands, if it came out once, it can come out again. I remember the first time I allowed myself to risk a word in another language. My heart was racing, my mouth felt dry, but when I spoke, I realized nothing terrible had happened. On the contrary, it was liberating. Every word you utter, even if it's crooked, helps create connections in the brain that facilitate the next. It's science, but it's also lived experience. If you're stuck, try starting small. Say hello to someone, order a coffee, send a short voice message. Don't expect to master 100 phrases. Start with one. Confidence comes from action, not theory. And the sooner you experience this small revolution, the sooner you'll feel the path is open to much more. There's a silent belief that holds many people back, that we need permission to speak. We grow up conditioned to ask permission, to wait for approval, and we carry this habit into adulthood without realizing it. The problem is that when learning a language, this becomes a prison. You wait for the okay that never comes, while your voice remains hidden. Stop and think. How many times have you avoided trying a word because you thought you weren't skilled enough? This feeling of unworthiness is even stronger than the fear of making a mistake. It's as if there were an invisible line and you needed a badge to get in. Except that badge doesn't exist. The eternal wait only reinforces the idea of inadequacy. The turning point begins when you understand that permission is a choice, not a concession. You can grant yourself this right now, without a diploma, without a seal of approval. Saying a short sentence, sending a simple message, even practicing alone out loud is enough to break this illusion. And each time you do this, the myth of permission loses its power, making way for something even more revealing. Silence may seem safe, but in practice, it's one of the cruelest forms of self-sabotage. It gives the impression of control, that we're avoiding embarrassment, when in reality, we're only fueling insecurity. Every time you choose not to speak, you reinforce the idea that you're incapable. And without realizing it, you become hostage to this habit. The cost is high. Conversations that could open doors fall by the wayside, opportunities for practice are lost, and even personal relationships fail to blossom. The mind creates a feeling of momentary relief, but the price comes later, in the form of regret and frustration. You keep what you wanted to say, but you keep brooding over your lack of courage. That consumes you more than the mistake would have. And the longer the silence lasts, the harder it becomes to break. The weight of what's unsaid grows like a mounting debt. Your tongue ties, your body feels it, and you begin to believe that speaking is a nearly insurmountable obstacle. But there's a way to break the cycle before it becomes permanent, and it starts surprisingly simply. Starting imperfectly is a privilege few realize. While many remain stagnant, waiting for the security that never arrives, those who take the first step are already paving the way. Initial progress doesn't depend on perfection, but on courage. Each attempt paves the way for the next, and this creates a wealth of experience that no manual provides. Those who allow themselves to make mistakes early gain a silent advantage. Time begins to work in their favor. While some spend energy idealizing, others have already tested, adapted, and evolved. This contrast becomes clear when you realize there is no shortcut to practice. The real difference lies not in who knows more, but in who moves faster. And it doesn't take anything grand to let go. It could be choosing a phrase and using it today, even with an accent. It could be asking a simple question in English, asking for directions, or even sending a short message out loud to yourself. This act puts you at the starting line. And before you know it, you're no longer the beginner waiting, but the apprentice advancing. The comfort zone is treacherous. It presents itself as a safe, familiar space where nothing goes wrong. But deep down, this security comes at a high price. It hinders any possibility of growth. Staying silent seems comfortable, but this comfort is precisely the golden trap that makes you believe you're protected when in fact you're trapped. The brain loves predictability, preferring the known to the uncertain. That's why the mind keeps repeating, better not to speak, better not to risk it. But each time you give in to this voice, you confirm the idea that imperfect speech is dangerous. And over time, this protection turns into a wall that limits your freedom. The comfort zone ceases to be a shelter and becomes a cell. The way out begins when you realize that absolute security doesn't exist. There is, however, productive discomfort, that butterflies in your stomach feeling of trying something new. It's this discomfort that paves the way for evolution. So, if you're still hiding in that golden space today, know that the key to unlocking it is already there. One small step out of your comfort zone can change everything. There's a myth that traps many people. The idea that everyone is paying attention to every word you say. It feels like there is an invisible audience judging every detail, waiting for you to make a mistake. This illusion creates enormous pressure, turning any attempt into a stage of pressure. But the truth is far less dramatic. Most people are too busy with their own insecurities to notice yours. They also are afraid to speak up. They also make mistakes, and they also blame themselves. It's rare for someone to commit their mistakes to memory, but in your head, they loom large. This disconnect between perception and reality is paralyzing. You believe you're in the spotlight when in reality, almost no one is. When you understand this, speaking becomes easier. The mistake stops being a spectacle and becomes just part of the conversation. And if by chance someone notices, they'll probably forget within minutes. Courage is born from this understanding. The audience you fear doesn't exist. And when you realize this, you discover that the freedom to express yourself has always been closer than you thought. Perfectionism seems like a virtue, but in practice, it's one of fluency's greatest enemies. The longer you wait for the moment when you'll speak without a single mistake, the further away that day becomes. It's a cruel paradox. By striving for perfection, you distance yourself from the very process that leads to it. Perfect speech isn't born from silence. It's born from imperfect attempts. Every minute you delay for fear of making a mistake is a minute you could be spending practicing. Fluency isn't achieved theoretically, but through the friction of real experience. You'll only learn to adjust your pronunciation, rhythm, and confidence when you put your voice out there. Waiting for the perfect moment is like holding your breath for the perfect wave. Before you know it, you're out of breath. The turning point lies in accepting good enough. Speaking simply, even with setbacks, is already paving the way for improvement. This practical step dismantles the illusion of perfection and opens the door to real progress. Because in the end, those who dare to be imperfect today are precisely those who achieve excellence tomorrow. There's a little talked about secret to learning: the power of momentum. When you take one step, even a small one, the next becomes easier. The first word paves the way for the second, which paves the way for the third, and suddenly you're in a flow. This accumulation of small actions builds confidence naturally, without artificial effort. Science explains, each attempt creates new connections in the brain, strengthening the pathways that facilitate speech. But in practice, you don't need to think in scientific terms. Just notice how much lighter you feel after uttering a few sentences in a row. Your body relaxes, your voice gains rhythm, and your fear lessens. The positive cycle begins without you even realizing it. The challenge lies in initiating this movement. Without the initial impulse, nothing happens. But when you launch yourself, the action itself becomes fuel to keep going. It's like a wheel that starts slowly and with each turn gains speed. The secret is to trust this process and not stop halfway. Getting started doesn't have to be a daily battle against procrastination. Creating a simple ritual makes speaking automatic without the emotional weight. It could be repeating a phrase every morning, recording a short audio recording before leaving the house, or always choosing a new word to use each day. This small gesture signals to the brain, I've already started. The secret to ritual is that it removes friction. Instead of wondering, will I train today? You already have a ready-made, defined action. It doesn't depend on motivation, it depends on habit. And when the habit is established, speaking ceases to be a rare event and becomes part of the routine. The more automatic it is, the less room there is for excuses. These rituals create a cumulative effect. What seems small adds up over time, and when you look back, you realize what a huge leap you've made. Inertia disappears because you no longer argue with your mind, you simply act. And at that point, the question stops being, when will I start? And becomes, how far can I go from here? The time has come to turn the key. You've already realized how silence can be a prison, how perfectionism blocks you, and how the first step opens doors that previously seemed closed. The question now is, will you keep waiting for the ideal moment, or will you start today even if it's with a simple phrase? The challenge is practical. Choose a word, a greeting, a short question, and use it today. It could be at the grocery store, on your cell phone, or even by yourself out loud. The important thing is to take action. Only then will fear fade and confidence grow. With each attempt, you prove to yourself that you can do it. So tell me, what will be your first word after this video? Leave a comment because sharing is also a way to reinforce your decision. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue receiving this kind of content that will help you speak English and, more importantly, unlock your voice once and for all.